Okay, so Superhuman AI for multiplayer poker. Great. So basically, recently, a little less than a week ago, a new poker engine AI, whatever you want to call it, called Pluribus came out, and they've written a paper. Noam Brown, who was one of the engineers, I think, behind Libratus, and Sandholm, not sure who that is, has basically come up with another AI for multiplayer. And so here, this is one of the sort of articles. This is the article that they've made, and we're going to have a look at the quick description of Pluribus before we start analyzing his hands. So I've got the 10,000 hands, which is not a lot, but we'll go through it. So first off, basically we can see is that it had some self-play to produce a strategy while offline, and that created what they call a blueprint strategy, which appears to only be the first street. In other words, it has its own preflop strategy built into it. And it did that with a variety of extraction techniques. And so if you're familiar with Monka Solver, it's the same sort of idea. Monka Solver uses abstraction techniques in order to solve for these multi-way situations. And so Pluribus essentially could be thought of as a much more powerful sort of version of Monka Solver that has created a near GTO solution for its specific game tree. So in addition, while Pluribus was playing against the humans, if the humans had deviated from Pluribus's tree, Pluribus would adjust to that mid-game by recalculating with the extra bet size. So for people who are watching us on YouTube later, and if I put it up on the website, I'll just put the link to this underneath. So we got through the hand histories. So we got 10,000 hands, which is great. Not sure why these aren't all the exact same number, but whatever. So the first thing that we probably want to look at is the preflop strategy, because the preflop strategy is probably going to be pretty mixed because it was created as a blueprint. And like how we can do this is we go to statistics and we go to the Hold'em range visualizer in Poker Tracker 4, and then we can have a look at whatever position and whatever statistic that we want. So let's just have a look at its opening range. So we can look at the raise first in, and so these are all the hands that it opens. Its overall raise first in is 26.9%. When it gets to that situation. But we can have a look at the individual positions. So this is, for example, it's a RFI range or close approximation of its RFI range for the Lojack. So any questions about this so far? I assume you guys have all read the article.
It's fairly standard, apart from 10-8, with a slightly loose.
Yeah. So one of the biggest things to remember about Pluribus and the environment that it was playing in was that you've got a no rake environment. So there's no rake at all. And so because there's no rake, you're going to be playing slightly different hands with slightly different ranges than you would expect in a raked environment. So we can sort of compare this with this. So on the left, you got the Pluribus's preflop range based on the statistics that we have the 10,000 hands that we have, and we've got these Zenith Poker opening ranges, and you can see it's not too dissimilar.
Yeah, I would expect this range to be a little bit fuller, but he probably didn't got those hands pre-flop, like 8-7 suited. And I would assume that if he has 10-8 suited, like 25%, he probably has like 25% of Jack-8 suited as well, or something similar, you know? He just didn't got those hands. So the edges might be a little bit rough.
Maybe. So he's got 1 out of 4, right? So it opened it once and it followed the other 3 times. So if it was dealt, look at it. So it's dealt 1,600 hands. You would expect that, you know, on average it would be dealt each combination roughly once, a little bit more than once, because there's how many combinations there are? Like 1,300 combinations. So you would expect to be dealt each combination a little bit more than once, on average. So because it didn't open the Jack-8 suited, Queen-8 suited, it is probably because it either had 25% or something a low frequency enough that out of the 4 or 5 times that it was dealt, it didn't decide to open it. So maybe it should be in there at when you've got a much larger sample size. You might have some other hands at much lower frequency, but we don't really see that here because we don't have a large enough sample size.
Do we have any idea what opening size the bot uses?
Yep, so we'll discuss that in a little bit. But the opening sizes sort of in general. So here we've got, let's look at Ace King off, who's going to be dealt at the most. We can have a quick look at the opening sizes for the Lojack. So there was 2x, there was 2.25x, right, 2x, 2x, 2x. Sorry, I don't have a very good way to do this. 3.5, 3.5, 2.25, 2.
And this is the exact same position, just and same hand. So basically, his randomizes his opening size. Okay.
Yeah, there's a 2.5 there. Yeah, so it's randomizing the opening size, and this is exactly what you would expect at GTO. It's very difficult for a human to try and replicate anything like this. But once you get better at poker, you can sort of get away with it. And then it limped it once, which is kind of odd. Or followed it at once. I don't think that's true. I probably just limped it once. What else did I limp? Yeah, not sure. Maybe King Jack off.
So collateral, yeah.
Oh yeah, maybe limp jacks. And maybe it's got like a very low limping frequency in early position, but you can see that the bulk of the time it's raising. It's often raising here in early position for a low, like 2, 2.25, 2.5, and then throwing in some of the bigger ones at certain frequencies, and that's important because at the different pre-flop sizes, you're trying to representing a different range to try and squeeze out that little bit of extra value when you've got your strong hands, and sort of protect yourself when you've got like the weaker hands. So here, for example, pocket fours, I'd imagine that pocket fours would open to the smaller sizes all the time. So if we look through it, it'll probably just open to the smaller sizes almost all the time. But here, when you've got Ace King off, sometimes it throws in a 3.5 open. And maybe it does the same thing with kings. Sometimes it might open 3.5. Who knows? What exactly? Then you got 2.87. It's a little bit strange size. So a fair bit of mixing involved, but often is opening to 2 big blinds or 2.25 big blinds, so in the smallish size, right? And the range is quite similar here. Remember, in the Zenith ranges, it's a raked environment, so the value of the suitedness and the ability to hit a set goes down a little bit, and the value of the high cards trying to block your opponents from 3-betting you goes up a bit. So that's why they've got the King Jack off at 100%, while Pluribus is limping it or folding it, and slightly reduced frequencies for the other hands. So, any questions about EP? We'll move on to MP or the hijack. Yeah, again, quite similar.
Ranges seem fairly standard for E for these two positions, so nothing unusual here as far as I can tell.
Yeah, nothing unusual. Once again, same sort of idea. The difference between raked and no rake environment, slightly less value on the mostly high cards and slightly more value on the suitedness and the pocket pairs. So a little bit cut off.
I guess one of the things that we can easily observe in these three ranges is that he doesn't do the same thing that Libratus did, which had pretty much all the map with various frequencies. You know, obviously the junk combos that have a very low frequency, but they were there. So curious to see how the button looks like.
Yeah, I remember we only have the 10,000 hands. So maybe if you got like a 0.5% or whatever for these junky hands, then that's just the case. It doesn't really change the strategy too much. Sorry. Yeah, this is a button. So again, quite similar to other ranges.
Is it working out like or estimating or calculating its open ranges sort of in the same way as some of the preflop solves? Like, is it running like all the like the flop textures and just like an aggregate and looking at EV and equity?
Yeah, that's exactly what it's doing in its abstraction techniques. So I'd imagine that the same sort of abstraction techniques that they used were used in also sort of being used in Monka Solver as well. I'm sure if you read this in depth and had a better idea about what was going on, you probably look into it a bit better.
Hey, Thomas.
Yep.
Yeah. So, a question about these ranges. These are the observed pre-flop ranges over 10,000 hands.
Yes.
And then, whereas with Zenith, this is more of a based on either Monk or just based on more than 10,000 hands. It's based more on a GTO approach as opposed to an observed sample size.
Yes, this is the observed sample size for Pluribus, and this is what our estimate is based on calculations that we've done.
Yeah, I just think it's just given a sample size of 10,000. I mean, doesn't it strike you as kind of remarkable that how closely aligned they are? I mean, I would expect to see given the sample size 10,000 is not so huge, that there should be some differences that could be explained by the sample size, but they just seem to run so close together. It's remarkable, actually. Don't you think?
Yeah. So with GTO, it wants to maximize its EV, and so you basically the hands that are played at very very high frequencies are higher EV. The hands that are played at low or no frequency just don't make it in. So like the 10-4 off, like it's pretty obvious that that's minus EV, so it would just always fold that.
Mm-hmm.
We get some differences in the small blind. The small blind, this is the total VHIP for the small blind.
Does he
so look at the raise first in
small blind?
Oh, yeah, so it was going to have an open limping range. At least it appears to have an open limping range. So sort of what the 3-bet range in total is from the small blind. but it's got a limping range quite obviously. So here, this is the raise first in. So with these frequencies, there's quite a lot of these offsuit hands and sort of these strongly suited hands make it into the RFI range, and you've got these at 100% frequency, while other hands were limped. Of course, by the time you get to the small blind RFI, the sample size goes down because the other players would have raised pre-flop, and so you know how long I have the raise first in. So you can't really tell too much about this in terms of raise first in, because the button would have raised at 40%, so that cuts out 40% of your sample. So not much of a sample to go off there. But one of the things that we could probably say is that from the small blind, it's got the mixed strategy between raising and limping, and it also uses a variety of different sizes. So if you look at some hands, it's like A7, 2.75, 2.75, 2, 3. So even from the small blind, it's got a good mix of sizes.
Are these sizes randomized, or do they have anything? Are they specific to the range, which seems kind of odd to me? Like, is it just a randomized decision?
So it's the same sort of thing as you having multiple bet sizes on the flop and different ranges associated with each size.
Okay,
so it's the exact same idea.
So in other words, you're going to have aces in the small size and aces in the big size, and but just in conjunction with different ranges that can have similar hands in each one.
Yeah. And just the same way as we looked at the RFI, and there's a variety of different sizes used, right? There's 2.25 for the queens, there's 2x for the queens, 2.5x for the queens. Same sort of thing. You're going to have multiple preflop sizes. Each preflop size is a slightly different range, with slightly different weights for each hand. And because of that, it allows for slightly more flexibility when facing a 3-bet or a call, etc.
Now, it's human opponents are going to have a hard time trying to duplicate that type of strategy, right?
Yeah, I mean, the aim is to do it in a roughly balanced way here. Pluribus, if we believe what the article is telling us, it does it in an exactly balanced way, balanced beyond anything a human could do. But if you're trying to implement something like this yourself, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing stopping you. And trust me, I've done it. You're not going to make things worse for yourself, as long as you sort of have a rough idea about how to play each spot post flop, or at least an idea better than most of your opponents.
Yeah, I'm just having a hard time grasping the benefits of it, really.
Yeah, so the benefits, when you open to a slightly larger size, you're allowed to have a slightly more polar range. All right, so if we look at like ace-3 offsuit here, there's got to get 2.5, a little bit of 2x, 2.5, 2.25, 2.87, 2.5, 2.87, right? So the ace-3 slightly larger size compared to like the pocket 2s, right? 2.5, 2, 2.25. Difficult to appreciate the difference unless we got a much larger sample size. But in general, a bigger size will have a slightly more polar range. Of course, pre-flop, because of how the equities run, you can't just have like aces and then ace-2 suited and then that's a single range, because that doesn't make any sense. Better to have a good mix of hands, but it is slightly different.
And theoretically, the opening sizes affects the frequency of the opponent's donking range.
Yes.
Okay, that's something I'm working on too, but I don't want to digress from this because you mentioned that, and I've been trying to figure it out, and I can't. But I guess we can discuss that later.
The preflop opening size should also have an impact, pretty significant impact actually, on the 3-bet frequency and the defend frequencies from the big blind.
Yeah,
it'll definitely have a difference on the defending frequencies of the rest of the table. Well, one of the interesting things that you get with having multiple open sizes, and I'll see if I can pull up a sim in PySolver. With multiple open sizes. Let's go with a rake-free one. Yeah, let's just have a look at a heads up. A little bit different, but maybe you can appreciate it. So this is with 3 different sizes, and we can have a look at how the through frequency and the calling frequency changes with each size. This is just heads up. So 2x, so you've got 22.7, 65.49, right? 2.5x, right? 3-betting a little bit less, calling a little less, not unexpected. And then against bigger size, you're 3-betting a bit less, and then calling a bit less. Right, so as the size goes up, you 3-bet less and you call less. That's exactly what you think would happen. But if you assume that they only use a single size, let's see if I've got any. Okay, so that's this is against 50% opening range. Yeah, against a min raise. This is what it looks like. So 11.63, and against the same opening range for a slightly bigger size, 50%, you have more 3-betting, right? Which is the opposite of what you think would happen. Sorry, have I been clear enough about what I've stated? I probably haven't. Let's see if I can have another instance so I can show you guys. Okay, so here, it doesn't like to go to less enough. So basically, here on the left, so we had the same opening range, okay, 50%. On the left, you opened a 3x, and on the right, we opened a 2x, okay, same range. On the left, the bigger size, we're 3-betting to 15% roughly, and the smaller size, we're only 3-betting to 11.63%, which is the exact opposite of what you would expect to do against the small size with roughly the same range, right? So you think that because of the smaller size, you should 3-bet more, right? And that is true in general. Against a smaller size, you want to 3-bet more. But if the ranges are the exact same, You actually want to 3-bet more when they've opened to a larger size, because you're going to be folding more often. Your calling range doesn't have to have as much protection. Your opponent isn't going to c-bet into you as at quite a high frequency. Versus against a smaller size, you're calling much wider. Your opponent's going to c-bet into you a lot.
Yeah, that makes sense because of pot size as well. If you like raise smaller, you get a very good price to call. Whereas if you 3-bet, you play a 3-bet pot out of position, you risk more eventually to like earn like 2 big blinds instead of 3.5 that you get to steal probably a lot more often.
Yeah, exactly.
Easier.
Exactly. But at true equilibrium, the different size is actually a weaker range. Okay, and because of that, you're going to be wanting to 3-bet more often. So here in the heads up, the smaller size, you're 3-betting at 22.5. Versus the larger size, you're only 3-betting at 17.61, because the ranges themselves are different. Okay, so here in this simulation with the multiple sizes being used balanced against each other, the different bet size represents a different range, and because that range is different, your 3-betting frequency against that is going to be different. Okay, versus if it's the exact same range for or a very similar range for the two different sizes, the strategy against the larger size, you're going to 3-bet more often. Okay, and that's why in my preflop ranges, you get much closer to 3-bet or fold against the bigger sizes, even though at GTO it's quite wrong. It's quite incorrect to do that. Where is it? Wrong one. Yeah, so it's just okay, so against the 2 big blind RFI, so big blind versus button, and here I do the same thing. Why that didn't work, I don't know. Big blind versus button, 4 big blind RFI. So you can see there's much more 3-betting against the large size versus against the small size, and it's because I've assumed that the players are playing their entire range the same way. They're not adding any additional polarity by having multiple open sizes. But against a player that has multiple open sizes and additional polarity with the bigger size, I'd be much more hesitant to play closer to 3-bet or fold against them. Okay, and I'd want to 3-bet the 2 BBI RFI more often. Does that make sense? So,
Yeah.
so my own preflop ranges, while they're good against humans, they're not going to be as good against a bot. They'll use multiple open sizes at different different frequencies, representing different polarities. Because these ranges, preflop ranges, are meant to try and play against humans, not bots. That's what they're built for. So any questions about that? So we talked a little bit about the different preflop sizes, using multiple preflop sizes, and sort of how to respond to that.
I think it's pretty clear. We can move forward.
All right, great. Let's go back to this. Yeah, so let's just have a look at some of the hands. So we can just use some filters to have a look. So let's just have a look at some of the ways that I play the RFI. So if it raise first in, you can just and then let's have the preflop raise, cut to 2-betting. So basically, it raised first in, and then it was in a 2-bet pot.
Before we dive into hands, would it be possible to like see an overview of the results of the bot and the results of the players? Is there something like that? Could they like switch the view or something?
Yeah, so we can tell at the graph. That's what the graph looks like for the bot. It doesn't really mean much, but because of that, the sample size is so small.
Yeah.
Some extra stats. That's that. The thing is, this graph has got a lot more to do with how the humans responded to how the bot played. So
yeah,
so you can't really read too much into it.
Well, you can still observe that the red line is fairly is staying at 0, which means that he's playing a fairly aggressive game, is stealing a lot, and he is not really trying to make hands to win hands, right? Because otherwise his red line would go down and his blue line would go up. So this is a just looking at this, you can identify him as an aggressive player and probably a good player just by looking at the red line.
He's not,
it'd be interesting
to many hands for showdown.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see the other players as well, just for a quick comparison on what he was playing against. But if that's not possible, that's okay, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into other players. I can't remember what the names are in this thing. So we'll just have a look at how the bot's played. So let's go back and add that filter back in. So yeah, what was happening? So 2-bet pots that we raised first in. Let's just have a look at this. And so if we look at all the different bet sizes that it used or was able to use here, it's a half pot, right? Half pot, and if we look through all of it, so that's pot, and there's some 2-pot. So let's have a look at some boards where you might expect to have 2-pot. Maybe this one. That's single pot. Yeah, ace king 8. Yeah, twice pot. Half pot. On the paired board, yeah, half pot. This going through, if we look through all these hands in the single raise pot, it becomes pretty clear that the bot probably wasn't given the ability to bet quarter pot in the single raise pot. Maybe it's because the difference between the 2 bet sizes was too small or something like that. But it couldn't use a quarter pot bet. It couldn't use a 75% pot bet. I'm not sure whether or not it could use a 1.5 pot bet, but it seemed that its flop bet sizes in the single raise pot was limited. So here you would expect in general on paired boards, it just makes more sense to use a smaller bet size. And here bets half pot, which is probably fine to some degree, but I'm sure that if the bot was allowed to bet quarter pot, it would have done that somewhere, right? Looking through all these hands. Right. So it's not. It's far more likely that the bot wasn't allowed to bet half pot in a single raise pot than it is that it chose not to. Does that argument make sense? So we don't really know exactly how the bot was made in terms of what bet size it was allowed to use. Right. And we know from our analysis of single raise pots that betting quarter pot, at least some of the time, makes sense on the flop.
Would this be? I guess this would be more of a. I think on purpose they limited the size of the RAM.
Yeah.
Using. Yeah.
So I think what they're saying is that it stuck to the blueprint for the earlier streets as much as it could, and then only reran the sims when the humans made a play that was a bit out of line from what it understands of its image of the game tree at that stage. So if it was only given the 3 sizes, half pot, pot, and 2 pot on the flop, well, that's all it's used. That's all it can see. That's all it can do. So it's going to miss stuff like the quarter pot c-bet, the 75% pot c-bet, the 1.5 times a pot c-bet, because it wasn't given that tool to use.
Then as it gains experience against humans and see them deviating from the blueprint, I mean, does it adjust its bet sizing, or?
I don't think that's how it was made. So I think the deviation from the blueprint was just the rerunning of the post-flop sim that it had.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, while it was mid-hand. All right, so do you guys want to have a look at some of the specific hand histories? I'm not sure how many of them will be particularly interesting.
I think it would be interesting, Thomas.
Let's have a look at some of the big pots.
Well, I mean, I know the bet size is kind of limited, but looking for examples where it tends to track along what we know at Zenith, and examples where it really deviates from what we know at Zenith. Like you just pointed one out that, you know, on that king, queen, king board, you know, quarter pot's probably the more optimal bet size to use.
Yeah, I mean, even though that bet size is more optimal, like it's going to play as strong as it can with its limited resources. So, yeah, let's have a look at some hand histories real quick. All right, so what do we have here? So we're on the button. So Pluribus on the button. I think it was just, yeah, we click on the button hands. So this is interesting. So the cutoff, who is?
Is it possible to like have it like on a table so it's easier to like view rather than text?
Yeah, right. So oh, there we go. Got some stats on them.
Awesome.
Eddies, let's say one hand. All right, let's just have a look. Let's enlarge this. So the most interesting thing is that it just flats. Yeah, okay. I don't know. It's pretty easy hand to play when your opponent shoves into you when you've got the nuts. But well, the interesting thing is that it's got this floating range on the button, and that involves queens. So yeah, if you do have a flattening range, you do need to have queens in it in case you get squeezed. Then you can back raise your queens, and we know that from Preflop sims. So what Pluribus is doing, maybe if we go and have a quick look at the way that's played pre-flop. So the statistics, and then we can go to like pre-flop 3-bet on the button. So this is what the 3-betting range sort of looks like. This is all the hands that it's 3-bet. So it's had 298 hands that it's 3-bet on the button.
It looks like a fairly polarized range with king blockers, ace blockers, suited connectors, and strong hands.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we don't have an enormous sample size to go with.
Yeah, but we can fill in the blanks. I mean, we certainly have ace king suited and king queen suited, and probably a little bit of low frequency for ace 8 suited as well. we can notice here that the frequency increases towards ace-2 suited and ace-3 suited. But apart from that, again, it seems like a standard polarized 3-bet range, though.
Yeah, so polarized 3-bet range, and that makes more sense in a low rake environment. So this I don't know if you guys know the Snowy preflop stuff. It looks remarkably similar to what Snowy's doing, with its like calling and raising. We can have a look at probably the 3-bet sizes that it used. So here, kings. Oh, I lost a big hand with kings. 7.5. What's the pot size? Ran into aces. It happens, I guess. Yeah, 8.25, a little bit on the big side. And specifically from the button, maybe we can have a look at MP versus EP. This is what its calling range of the open is, and then of course you don't have too many hands on it, and then the 3-bet percentage.
I wonder how his 5-bet shove range looks like, if he has something like that, or 4-bet shove range. I don't know. Wonder if he has any bluffs in that sort of action.
Yeah, I don't know if with 10,000 hands we probably don't have a big enough sample in order to really know. Actually, I'm lying. We can have a look at probably.
That's one of the points.
There was this hand here, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. Ships it into it. That's strange. That's a weird size to raise to. And then, yeah, I don't know. That doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah, raise and then.
Yeah, he doesn't shove there. It's like
95% of his stacking. Yeah, okay. I don't know. So aces there. But you can see it's got some degree of polarity, I guess. Maybe cutoff, calling, 3-betting, and calling does make more sense pre-flop when the rake is low. But when the rake is low, it does make more sense to have a flooding range, play a little bit in position, hope the blinds get out of the way. Or if you're going post-flop, then you can go post-flop and navigate that in position, hopefully. And
following the low rake argument, doesn't that also entice the blinds to play?
Yeah, the blinds will play, but you're in position against the blinds. So when there's no rake, that doesn't matter as much. But if there's rake, then you kind of want to kick them out. The act of raising and rake when it's calculated is only post-flop rake. If the opponents all fold pre-flop, right, then you don't have to worry about the pot getting raked. Which is why my pre-flop ranges, the ranges on Zenith are quite a bit more aggressive against opens. It's partly to try and avoid rake. You go for the 3-bet because if everyone folds, you avoid having to pay rake, which is much better than calling, and you basically guaranteed to pay rake on that hand that you played by calling.
Yeah.
Any other questions so far? A little bit about looking a little about the versus open.
I want to ask you how you adjust if they take you rake pre-flop. How you adjust the ranges?
Yeah, if they take rake pre-flop, then like it doesn't matter quite as much.
So you
can start to have calling. It's a pretty bad game to be playing in if you're getting rake pre-flop.
Okay, because I play few games. with rake preflop.
Like when everybody folds, they'll take rake anyway.
Yes, depend of the cap of the pot.
Yeah, I mean that's
They
pretty
take only
ridiculous.
one BB.
Yeah, I mean I think in live games they do that. Yeah, I've never seen that. I don't think that happens online at all. Yeah, so that's sort of the major difference between rake, the raked environment, and an unraked environment. Unraked environment, you're much happier to call in position, and you see that with Snowy as well. If you turn the rake up in Snowy, or you reduce the stakes in Snowy because the rake think it's flat across all of them. Snowy likes to play much closer to 3-bet or fold, versus if you reduce the rake down, Snowy will have a much wider flattening range.
Yes, I see in your game with Snowy.
Yeah.
He called more from small blind because the rake was low.
Can we have a look at some difficult boards? Like what happens on boards
I
like...
was going to say this one thing, right? So here if we look at the small blind against an open, actually, no, that doesn't make any sense because someone's got some money in. Yeah, this is the small blind's VPIP against an open. Sorry, the small blind's VPIP in total. Yeah, let's just use a filter. So we just go to action opportunities. So facing a 2-bet, and look at the small blind. This is what the small one was doing against a an open. Yeah, facing 2-bet. So it's interesting. Let's have a look at this. Yeah, that was against a limp. No, that was when it faced an open. It limped and then faced an open. So it's got some of that. I think we have to ignore that in the filter as well. I don't want that. First preflop action to raise. Okay. Yeah, let's look at that. All right, so this is the small blinds. So Pluribus in the small blinds, how it's decided to play against an open. So it's 3-bet opportunities, and then facing a raise. So when it's faced an open in the small blind, what it's decided to do with each of these hands. Yeah, you can see that at all times it wanted to raise these. Obviously, the sample size isn't great. So here, Mr. Blonde is under the gun, and you got the 4-5 suited, and then the Pluribus decides to make it like 5x with the 4-5 suited. So it seems to be quite a bit more aggressive with these sort of connected hands in the small blind. You've got these 100% frequencies, even though the sample size is small. It's not amazing, but 100% frequencies nonetheless. Jack 10 offsuit, 2 out of 2.
That would be the only hand that's really standing out. That and Queen Jack off. Those are like unusual.
Yeah. It could be the filter that I've done. Let's have a.
He have the same range 3-bet from small blind, no matter who opens versus early poison and versus button, the same range. I see. He 3-bet.
So let's just use this filter, and so versus faced steal attempt in small blind. So steal is I think specifically you can see the cutoff a button. Who knows, right? So there's that. So 50%. So continue 50% of the time. So it's VFIP 50% of the time. Through bet 50% of the time. Not necessarily. So here it's chosen to 3-bet it. Sometimes it's chosen to call it. So it's VFIP all the time. No, it's chosen to fold. Queen 9. Yeah, let's have a look at this one. So here the Queen 9, we're in the small blind. The cutoff opens to 2.1, and we've called. So the small blind definitely has a flatting range of some description against stills. Even here against the button, you got button open 2.5, small blind calls. Right, so we can probably say that in the no and very low rake environment, having flats in the small blind even against these button opens is acceptable. See if it traps anything. There you go, here with 10s, a lot of flooding, Preflop. Don't know who Bill is. 2.7, and then it flats in the small blind. And then checked. So yeah, I'm flatting in the small blind. I've got the three bet percentages. So these are the 3-bet range. That's what it looks like. So ace queen's not in there, which means that ace queen against the steal it's only dealt at once, so you can't really tell. But I guess we can clear this filter and have a look at the 3-bet percentages. So this is what it looks like from the small blind, and there's going to be a calling range. So the small blind appears to have a reasonable calling range, but yeah, with the sample that we've been given, it's always 3-betting like jacks plus ace queen offsuit most of the time. And a little bit of other stuff. So it looks fairly similar to Snowy, to be honest. But of course, the sample size is quite small. Yeah, so when the rake is low, you've got much more opportunities to call rather than wanting to play more aggressively pre-flop. And a little bit post-flop as well. You want the hand to end now before you get raked. So slightly less aggression overall. Okay, so do you guys... Sorry?
Yeah, so that would probably imply that his 3-bet, 4-bet range is probably a lot tighter and a lot more polar, and probably not that interesting. And it's probably more interesting to actually see, like weird boards where he either defends or without position, or whether or not he c-bets with strongish, middlish hands, like, I don't know, queens on a 6, 7, 8 type of board, and that sort of stuff where
so let's have a look at the big blind and when we 3. That's one probably.
So the rake,
when we 3-bet.
When the rake is low, we want to play more polar from the blind with 3-bet with strong hand. and with few bluffs. No.
Yeah, you want to get a bit more polar. You want to get more polar in general. You're going to be more accepting of a calling range pre-flop. But this is all things that we sort of already knew and just being confirmed in this bot here.
Can we have another look at those stats? Because there's something that stood out to me just at the...
So this is being filtered for any 3-bet that we've done.
Yeah, he's losing. Like, how is that possible? From the bottom and the cutoff, which should be like the most...
The sample size isn't very big. It's only 59 hands.
Wow, here.
And it is one more hands that's lost, so I don't really know.
He 3-bet and call. Wow. What a flop. Oh.
Yeah, so it's an interesting one, so Joe is on the button, and Pluribus is in the small blind. Joe was dealt the ace 8. So on raise, 3-bet, got the ace 10 out of the way, which is nice, I guess. Joe called, and then Pluribus pots it on this one.
Yeah.
I think it's jammed on and snapped it off. So I don't know, interesting way to play that one. Pluribus in the small blind. Joe raised, 3-bet, then check, lose stays high. Once again, interesting way to play that one. Any particular flops you guys want to look at? There you go. Base the 4-bet, and then shipped on the river. That was interesting.
Do you think that's an interesting hand? Because he's bluffing here with ace queen. You know, he calls flop to a reasonable c-bet, just with the overs and the backdoors. Well, 2 backdoors if you count the 10 as well for straights. But when blue gives up on the turn, he shoves, which is quite interesting. Assuming that he still has some showdown, right, with ace queen.
Yeah, just because you've got showdown, it doesn't mean you shouldn't bluff. You still only have some bluffs. So the boss will have just much higher EV because the opponent's abandoned some of their hands, given up some of their hands. All right, so let's have a look at some of the biggest hands played. Sort of like this, I guess. Let's look at some of the biggest hands that's lost, shall we? Just replay like this.
Just something to clarify. Every hand starts with 100 BB, right?
Yeah, that's my understanding. Goes with a cold 4-bet. Interesting size used there. It's jammed on. And snaps it off. Okay. Doesn't make it. All right. Is there some post-flop action in this one? Limps, raises, 3-bets, holes, pots it, gets jammed on, snaps it off, doesn't make it. Doesn't hold. All right. That's a pretty boring loss. I mean, you're ahead when you get in, and you lose, I guess.
I'm surprised that his EV line is not better. I mean, it should be better, right?
Yeah, okay.
Cool.
I mean, I don't know what to make of the
It kind of seems to me that
I don't know what to make with this guy shoving the river, but I guess he got paid off, so I don't know who Mr. Pink is.
Yeah, it seems to me that the players kind of knew that there's a bot playing, and they also know that, you know, if a bot ever has a 9 here, he's likely not going to fold, even if he has an ace to an overbet like this massive. This seems like an explosive play from Mr. Pink. So
yeah, I don't know about that.
But if he don't call this, what he call? He will become exploited.
No, the thing is, in my opinion, here, Mr. Pink on the river. If we just go back a step, if they bet like half pot, like all the nines are going to raise anyway, so and you're going to get paid off by all the aces. So instead of just like betting 4.5 times a pot, it just makes sense to bet half pot and then get raised, and then you can jam.
Exactly. That's the reason why I think that there was some idea that they were playing against a bot or something like that. Maybe.
Do you think that biases the play by the humans, that they know they're playing against a bot?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It looks like the names are anonymized at some stage. I don't think. Yeah, I mean, they definitely could bias the play if they know which one of the other players that they're playing against is a bot. Right. If they all had anonymized names and they didn't know who was playing in which position, then maybe the play would have been different. But who knows? We can just speculate about how they've done it. What I'm trying to say is that I don't think this river play makes any sense from Mr. Pink. All the nines are going to raise like a small bet anyway, a half pot bet anyway. So just shoving doesn't accomplish much more than just a small bet. And in fact, it loses some value. Like here, you've got the top boat. You can sort of like rep an ace, try and get some value from like a whatever.
Maybe he was trying to get like value from an ace-x suited of diamonds, but still, it's all this overbet.
Thing is, it gets the same. It gets good value from those by betting half pot rather than trying to fold them out.
Yeah, I totally agree.
All those will call a half pot bet, and like any of the stronger the 9x, the straight, if there is any, will raise anyway, so you can shove. So seems a bit odd. I don't know. Okay, we'll see how it gets away from this one. Yeah, I mean. Yeah, I think Mr. Blue might have missed out on some value by allowing that turn to check back.
Yeah.
Well, that's a small blind.
Do he have 5 bet bluffs in his range?
Yeah, I guess we can have a look at some of this preflop action. Raise fold.
Or because the rake is low, is 0, you don't need to play 5 bet bluffs games.
Yeah, there's definitely some 5 betting going on. You gotta see. There's just not very many hands. Raise, raise, raise. Raise, we raise, call. Like here, for example, you got a 4-bet, and then you got shoved on and you fold. Yeah, I don't think it's there just hasn't been enough hands. Like in order to get the 5-bet, it would be RRR. Oh, yeah, here we go. So trapping aces here. Out of position, which is not what you'd expect with it. So here, MP opens to 2.1. The bot 3-bets the aces and gets 4-bet, and then just flats the small 4-bet. I guess that makes a little bit more sense to do with aces if you do want to have, and of course this size is quite small as well. So I guess that's interesting there. And then check raises the flop and then ships on the turn. That's the kings. Yeah, I mean that's kind of boring. I mean, come on, got a 4-bet to like a normal size so we can see how it 5-bets the kings, but well, just end up I don't know who Mr. Pink is, but that doesn't make too much sense. What was it, small blind and then 3-bet just jams? Okay. I mean, I guess.
Maybe he assumed that the player will overcall with, I don't know, like ace queen suited or something like that. It's kind of weird. 5-bet shove jacks. Sorry, 4-bet shove jacks. No, 5-bet shove anyway. What was it?
Yes, this is interesting. Possibly the queen 10 offsuit in the 4-bet range. Certainly not on my ranges against the 3-bet from a small blind. So lots of something different. But then again, it could be the size that was chosen or something. What size was chosen for that 3-bet? 4x. Yeah, okay, that is interesting.
Does the bot I don't know if I use the word understand or program. Is it prioritizing like winning the hand or maximizing EV?
It is maximizing EV.
Okay.
If you just want to win the hand, you can just open shove everything.
So in that previous hand, the bot thought it had enough fold equity against 3-bet to 4-bet the queen 10 off. There was some positive EV in that calculation?
Not necessarily positive EV, but it could be zero EV. It could be indifferent between forwarding it and folding it.
So how does it choose when indifferent?
It has its frequencies built into it. So just the same way as if you look at a post-flop sim, it's got some hands which might play raise or fold. It's got a frequency between the two.
I see.
Oh, that's interesting. This is it's a bit cooler. Have a look at it. Donks. Okay. Sorry, it got donked into by this bill. Yeah, all right. I haven't seen any spots where it's made a 5-bet, but that's just probably because it hasn't been 4-bet very often. And it could be because the humans don't 4-bet enough.
So when this bot's learning, it's playing against versions of itself, like
sort of. I mean, it's more. Here's an interesting one. This is called 3-bet, 4-bet, yeah, 5-bet. Okay. That's interesting. Here, the 5-bet side is not all in. Went to like 43.2% of its 43% of its stack, and then interesting. I mean, I don't think there's any difference, really, because any hand that you're making it to this size, you're going to be calling off anyway. So 5-bet is essentially an all-in, except given your an extra opportunity for your opponent to make a mistake by calling, I guess. Or maybe you're forcing them to call at some frequency because the size is so low. You see Snowy does we shot this all the time as well. Sorry, did I jump over one of your questions?
No, I was just wondering when I guess it's playing against itself, creating that the blueprint, the initial blueprint. But
yeah, I mean, it's saying it's playing against itself, but it's playing against itself in the same way that a solver plays against itself, like it runs all the calculations in an iterative fashion.
It's clairvoyant as far as the inputs, as far as the ranges. Like when
so it uses a technique called counterfactual regret minimization. So essentially, it the way that all the solvers do it is an iterative fashion, right? So it has a strategy, calculates what the expectation of each of the lines that it took, and then the difference between the two is the counterfactual regret. So say I take this one line against my strategy, against my previous strategy, and I get an expectation of say 2 big blinds. But if I took this other line, I would get an expectation of 2.5 big blinds. That difference is the counterfactual regret, and basically because you're looking back. So counterfactual regret, as in the EV that you've lost, and then you want to minimize that loss. So that's all what counterfactual regret minimization means. It's just like a fancy way of saying that, I want to minimize the amount of EV that I lose by playing a suboptimal strategy. Right, and then eventually by doing that over and over again, which is exactly what a solver does. If you look at GTO Plus and let it run, it counts up or whatever, goes through that little bar ticking across. That's what it's doing. It's calculating the expectation of all the lines in that particular strategy, and it comes up with the DEV value, and that tries to minimize that DEV value.
I see.
So all counterfactual regret minimization is a broader is a broader class of algorithms. The one that your solver uses is just one example of CFR, counterfactual, CRM, counterfactual regret minimization. It's not necessarily that all counterfactual regret minimization is the same thing as a solver. You can do it in different ways.
But these type of bots, like I don't want to put them all in a bucket, but like Snowy or something like this, like as opposed to a solver that's clairvoyant and knows the the ranges.
Pluribus and so don't get confused. So Lojack and Pluribus and Claudico and the one that solved the limit, they're all they're all solvers. There's no neural network at all with them, unlike Snowy, which is only a neural network, right? With whatever tree that it has.
So AI isn't clear. There's no clairvoyant in AI's strategy. I guess what I'm saying is AI, does it range? And like, I mean, I don't understand it's calculation of strategy when it really isn't aware of the exact input of it or range of its opponent.
Yeah, so the way that Pluribus calculated its strategy is the same way that all the solvers calculate. It's the same sort of algorithm that the solvers use to calculate their strategy. So it knows after the fact, after it's done its EV calculation, or it's actually before it's done EV calculation, after it's guessed at a strategy. So basically, you can narrow down the algorithm to a few different steps, right? So you have some strategy, say S1, right? Okay, and then you take the strategy and then you test it, right? So you test it against whatever opponents that you're playing against, and from that you get the expectation of that strategy. Okay.
Yep.
But in order to get this expectation, don't you need to like know the range of villain?
Sorry, that's my cat. In order to get the expectation, you have to know what the ranges are, and so it gets told what the ranges are. So basically, so you get the expectation of the strategy, of strategy 1, and then you get strategy 2, and then you get the expectation of strategy 2, right? And then you can basically compare the two. Right, so this is the second iteration. So basically, the first one is just guess. So this is why all the solvers start at just like 0. I mean, the same frequency for every strategy. So the S0 strategy is basically you calculate the expectation of that, and then you have a guess at this strategy. Maybe that depends on what the expectation is of S1, right? And then you guess at a better strategy. You calculate what that expectation is. You compare it to S1. And then you use that to create a third strategy, S3, right? You calculate the expectation from that strategy, right? And then use that expectation to calculate S4, right? To have a guess at S4, and then use that to guess to, then you calculate the expectation of S4, right? And then it's a whole iterative process until you basically get S infinity, which is the GTO strategy. At that stage, the expectations at each jump isn't going to change, right? So this difference might be quite large to start off with. So it might be like 10% to start off with, right? And then this might be 5%, and then this might be like 1%, and then eventually it gets closer and closer to 0. So there isn't any difference between the expectation of the two strategies because the two strategies are so similar and so close to optimal. So that's sort of the iterative process that it goes through. And so the counterfactual bit is basically I'm looking back at my opponent's ranges, how my opponent would have played. The regret is basically calculating the expectation, the difference between the expectation between the two strategies, and then trying to minimize this so this regret drops by creating a new strategy that's better than the old strategy. And this is exactly what a solver does. It's different from what Snowy does. Snowy does it in its own sort of way with its neural network. In that sort of case, it's just trying to win. So the neurons are adjusted after every round in its own sort of counterfactual regret minimization, except the algorithm that it uses is a neural network rather than a solver algorithm, right? So basically, Pluribus, Libratus, Claudico, they've all got basically a solution, their own blueprint stored in memory somewhere, which it can go to. Basically, an instruction list of how to play, and that's its strategy. On the other hand, with Snowy, its strategy is essentially sort of generated from its neural network. So you put in the inputs, and then the neural network spits out the output in sort of real time. So that's why you get some advantages with Snowy because it's quite fast, right? The neural network. But the disadvantages is that, well, Snowy isn't constructed very well, and it needs probably quite a lot more training to get there.
But it's not a solver.
Yeah, it's not a solver. Well, if we just make a comparison to chess for now, like the chess engine, the classical chess engines where basically just brute forces through the tree, they do very well. So for comparison, the strongest grandmaster in the world champion right now, has got a rating of like 2,900. But these computers can go up to like 3,500 in playing strength, which is like the difference between an expert and like a noob, right? So quite a large difference in sort of playing strength. And more recent implementations of, if you looked at Google created its own AI called Alpha Zero, basically, and then that played chess, got up to super GM level at like 4 hours or something, training itself, and that's just a neural network, right? It's a very complicated and fine-tuned neural network with some forward-looking ability, but yeah, plays just as well as the brute force technique. So maybe with Snowy, if it was given more bet sizes, if it was given more ability to look through the tree, given more computation time, it could become very, very strong as well. Or if it was trained using the solver data. So there is another project who was similar at the same time as Libratus, can't remember the name, which sort of did that. So it used a neural network to estimate pre-flop and flop strategy, and then from the turn river, basically brute force it with a stock standard solver from the flop ranges that it estimated, and it did really well. It could play basically any stack depth at any kind of rake, I think, at a superhuman level, and I think against humans it would beat like regular poker players like regs and recreational poker players at like it was something like 40, 45 big blinds per 100 hands at heads up, which is pretty insane.
I guess the potential for the AI is pretty much unlimited. Just given the information, the time, and the memory, and the computing power.
Yeah, I mean, the AIs can just keep getting stronger and stronger. But the thing is, when we're looking at them, we want to use them as tools to make ourselves stronger. So, like, for example, going back to chess, in 1997, the first chess computer beat the world champion, right? In a match. Did chess die because of that? No, it's better than ever now. The grandmasters are playing just better and better. Right? They see their own mistakes. They're playing they're playing at much higher levels than they used to. Right? And it's because they've used computers to analyze their own play and learn different ways of playing from the computers.
Yeah.
It's the same way as we, when looking at solvers, we're learning from the solvers, right? We're using the solvers to analyze our own play. We're getting better.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So it sort of squeezes out the long end of the tail, gets sort of stretched out. The players that put in the extra effort can become just way, way better than the players that they're playing against. All right. Do you guys want to look at...
Can we see flop c-bet turn river percent and squeeze percent?
So squeeze pre-flop percent in total was 5.51%. That was in total. Limps with previous limper. Yeah, didn't do much limping.
Flop turn river c-bet.
Where is that in statistics? And then we got summary. Yeah, it's been a while since I've used this. All right, so yeah, I don't know. We got pre-flop. Call 3-flop 3-bet. Reasonably highish frequency for calling a 3-bet pre-flop. Yeah, but that's not calling after you've opened. It's calling in total.
River c-bet.
Flop c-bet frequency. There's a total 3-bet c-bet frequency is around 50%. Turn drops a bit. River regression factor. Probably an easy way to see it is if we just look at the league tracker. Gets all the stats there for you. Yeah, I mean, I don't know who made this league tracker or why it's good, but you know, whatever. So the VPIP.
That's a bit less than the
VPIP
average.
27.4. PFR 17.86. 3-bet 17.26. See that flop 53.65%.
Yeah, that's why I was saying that he see bets a little bit less than expected.
Yeah.
It's on the lower range.
Yeah. I think this is mainly because, well, at least partially because it doesn't have the quarter pot bet size on the flop in a single raise pot. If it had that, I would imagine this value would be quite a bit higher. And Snowy, when Snowy added the quarter pot bet size, its total aggression went up by quite a lot overall.
Okay.
Don't see that regression frequency. Sorry, regression factor, regression frequency.
Something to notice here is that he gives up on hands on the turn, but if he gets to the river, he is not folding, basically. If we look at the turn fold to turn bet, it's quite high, whereas fold to river bet, it's on the lower end. So it pretty much implies that he will fold the turn more, but if he calls turn, he is likely to call river.
Yeah, I wouldn't read too much into these green bars or whatever, because they're just calculated based on, like, I imagine a bunch of human players, and human players differently to how the bot plays. The folding to single bets has got more to do with the bet size, and also whether or not you've made a bluff on one of the earlier streets, right? And sort of the range asymmetry. So here, river folding to river bet. If for whatever reason you're in a multi-way pot and your river folding frequency is going to be pretty high. Or if you've made a bet on a previous street and then check back and then you get bet into, you're going to be folding more often because you've got a lot of give ups. Or if you're just facing a massive overbet, then you're going to be folding quite often as well. So it's got more to do with the bet sizes that you face, definitely, than whatever some optimal frequency that you can't really tell too much.
Could we have a look at what he when he takes leads in a hand, not as in donks, but of things that happen when one of the streets goes check check. So how often does he take the lead in a hand? How often does he, I don't know, bluff? What hands go for value? That sort of stuff. Like, when villain showed weakness, what's his general approach? I guess.
Okay.
Because as we determined earlier, he has fewer bet sizes, and that would make his stabs, I don't know, probably more polar. I'm not sure.
So when I check bet, I don't know, maybe this one. Yeah, it's got quarter pot on the turn. For some reason, it didn't have quarter pot on the flop. Check bet, quarter pot. Check bet. Let's see if it does any donking. Or should have some donks here. Just donks pot. Okay. No, donk pot. That it's not a donk. It's in position. Let's just filter it for steals. Opportunities. Face any steal in big blind. And then called to that. So I'll do it. So let's just have a look at if there is some donking. I mean, I imagine there might be some. a little bit. No, that's still from the still. Yeah, this is all small blind open, small blind open, small blind open, small blind open, small blind open. Yeah, so there's no donking spots. That's a shame.
Okay.
All right, let's just have a look if it checks through. Half pot. And that one, you got bottom set here, and it bets quarter pot, and then it goes check check on the river. So yeah, interesting trap there. Betting the quarter pot and then boating up and then having to go for the check raise, but doesn't get bet into. What did Mr. Brown have? Ace high. Yeah, I mean, I guess you're not going to get too much value from ace high anyway. So what else? No, that's in position. Got to get my filters right. There you go. Check, check. Bets twice the pot with the flush draw and the gut shot and the 8 high. And then bets twice the pot on the river when it gets there. Pretty standard, I guess. So it doesn't seem too out of the ordinary.
Was that a 2x pot on the river?
Yeah, bet twice upon the river. I mean,
Okay.
like, I don't know if either of them have too many 2x left.
Yeah, it was a 2x pot on the river.
And then check bet. Quarter pot, and then bets half pot on the river.
So he have a quarter pot bet on the turn, not on the flop.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. It seems like in single raise pots there isn't a quarter pot bet size, and for whatever reason there wasn't any donking in the sample that we saw from the big blind in the single raise pot. So we looked at all the calls. So if we filter it for the pre-flop action, and then we called, and then we look at the flop action. If there was donking, then we would have saw it here. So this is all the opportunities for the line to have faced this deal. Maybe if I just get rid of face it still.
You can place out of position, maybe.
Yeah, let's do that. And details.
Player in position, there's, I guess, maybe.
Player position. Yeah, no, that gives the exact position.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this should do it. Let's just have a look at this, and then we can ignore the small blind stuff. Yeah, so it's a small blind again. Small blind. Small blind. Okay, here's an interesting one. So the bot's here in the big blind. It's an open from hijack, button flats, and then just it pots it. And both players call, and it gives up, I guess. Yeah, no, there is some donking, but that donk size was a pot. Interesting. Yeah, another multi-way plot where it's got a donk. But we haven't seen any heads up single raise pot donks yet. Maybe because the bet sizes that it was given wasn't appropriate for donking. So if it wasn't given a quarter pot bet size on a pot, quarter pot bet size in the single raise pots heads up, then I might not want to donk because a lot of the donk sizes are closer to the quarter pot size. Then again, there is also a possibility for sample size. We might not get the correct flops for it. I mean, a lot of these flops doesn't make too much sense to have donked anyway. And it's getting to the calling. So yeah, there wasn't any donking. From the big blind in the sample that we've got, which could just be down to the bet sizes that it was given to use. Yeah, so the bot does have multiple bet sizes, but it doesn't have an enormous range of bet sizes. At least it's got fewer bet sizes than what is commonly used in regular play. So a lot of higher stakes play gets with these really small bet sizes, right? And this bot appears to not have that in the single race pot. It doesn't have this quarter pot bet size in a single race pot. We know Snowy definitely does. We know that we've been able to look at our own post-flop simulations and found lots of situations where betting quarter pot makes a lot of sense. The paired boards are one of them. Very dry boards are one of them. We've also seen some situations where donking might make sense, but we haven't seen any donks in this sample. That could just be because the sample size is too small. Or it could be because it wasn't given a good bet size to choose to donk with. All right, so are there any more questions?
Well, we haven't really looked at any 3-bets and 4-bets spots. If we have any, maybe we have something interesting. But
all right,
you know,
we can have a look at some 3-bet stuff.
Not just pre-flop stuff, but you know, a couple of streets of post-flop play, I guess.
So we'll have a look at how it's played at 3-bets. So some big hands at 1 maybe. So we've got the 3-bet out of position, bet quarter pot, get raised, call, check, check. and then almost shove river. Yeah, that was a strange size. Is that 3/4? But it didn't shove. I don't know. Maybe it just wasn't given the shove size to use. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. That seems pretty standard way to play that. Maybe this one.
On the previous hand, don't you think that the river call with the flush is a little bit ambitious?
Yeah, probably, but yeah, it just seems like you've got way so many pairs after the flush comes on the turn. They don't really have to call off the flush on the river. All right, good. Yeah, okay, got the value of the SI. So this is the 3-bet pot, small blind versus big blind. Right, 3 bets to 3.5, gets a call. Half pot C bet, gets the call, goes to check, and then gets a that value bet on the river, outside value bet on the river, and then gets a call from the ace high.
This is a bad play from Bill. Why would you call a pot bet on this river? I mean, I understand the queen, okay, but the king, like.
Yeah.
If he's gonna call with ace high, at least
I'm not gonna read too much into it. Definitely gonna have to have a look at it. So let's have a look at some of the positions. Maybe here in the button. Some hands at the button 1.
So it kind of makes a difference because these players might be a bit, I don't know, I don't want to say weak, but certainly strange.
Yeah, I mean, so it's faced a cold 4-bet, bet quarter pot, call, picked the flush draw and the gut shot, checked it back, and then hits a river and checks it back. So I don't know, that doesn't seem too surprising to me. Does this line seem surprising to you? Not really, right? I mean, you've got too much equity to want to like give up by betting on the turn here. You want to be a bit more polar with your betting range on the turn. So this hand makes a pretty good check back. Hope to outdraw a pair or whatever, and then get the money in the river. So not too out of the ordinary. See how it plays this flush on the paired board. So as you open, cut off 3 bets are in the cutoff. Bets quarter pot. Base of raise, call. So that's pretty standard. Makes a pair. Calls. And then the flush comes and it shoves. Yeah, okay, so that's pretty standard. I don't think any of us would have played that too differently. A straight with the 9s. Interesting, possibly, because of this flop bet. So once again, hijack, cutoff, raise. It's a very small 3-bet size. So it's interesting to see that that was only 300 chips. So what was it, like a half pot, 3-bet size?
Come on, this
and
is
then pots the turn. Sorry?
This is a C-bet on the flop by Mr. Brown. Oh, sorry. check raise by Mr. Brown anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. But it is a pot-sized bet, so maybe Mr. Brown decided to trap and then raise the turn, but obviously didn't get that opportunity and then got outdrawn. Of course, with the two pair type hands in the 3-bet pots, there is a lot less check raising. Of course, there is some. So we can probably tell from some of the hands that have been played that Pluribus is actually playing pretty well. He's not making any like obvious mistakes, right? Aside from some bet sizings that it can't use. There's no like glaring weaknesses in its play.
Well, yeah, but the opponents that he's playing against certainly made weird plays, which will influence how much he wins, right? So I don't think these players were focusing on a GTO approach, or I don't know. Some plays were just weird. So maybe his win rate isn't that exceptional, or I don't know. I'm trying to open a discussion that win rate is dependent on the opponents that you play against, right? So since we're judging how Pluribus is playing and how much he won, it might be useful to have a conversation about the opponents as well in this context.
Yeah, of course. But when they're playing, opponents are playing strange, then there might not be as much you can do about it. So like your win rate, sure, is based on what your opponents have done against you, and how they've played. But your strategy should try to maximize how much you win from basically all possible opponents. And so if you're looking about it in terms of like a GTO bot, it's trying to play in this one defined way that doesn't change and beat anything that the humans could throw at it, including all these weird plays.
That would be something that I would totally agree with if we'd have a larger sample. On this small sample, we can't really know whether or not his strategy is effective, or how effective it is, right? Because I remember that shove on the river with the ace-9 against the queen-9. That's a totally weird play to take. You lose so much value. Of course, on that specific pot, he got max value from the bot, but still makes me question the validity of these results on such a small sample.
Yeah. With whatever statistical techniques that they chose to use, they ended up deciding that Pluribus was winning. So, and we can probably tell from some of the plays that the humans have made against Pluribus that Pluribus might be playing at a slightly higher level, even though the sample size is small. So let's go have a quick look at this again. So button opens, Pluribus 3-bets, and then the big blind cold calls queen-9 offsuit.
Is that 3-bet size a little bit larger than usual?
They opened at 2.87 big blinds, and this is 13 big blinds, so a little over 4x, 4.5x. That seems reasonable. And then like the big blind cold calls, a 3-bet.
Like, why with queen-9 off? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, humans don't play great, so I don't know. See how it goes post flop.
I'm just trying to say that any reg would fold that hand without second, I don't know, thinking about it for a second, right? I mean, if he elects to 4-bet here with queen-9 off, whatever, I will not talk about that because that's something else. But calling here it's atrocious.
Yeah, I agree. It is pretty bad. And then it calls the flop with the gut shot. Okay, gut shot and the naked gut shot. And then bets quarter pot-ish. And then donk shoves river. Yeah, that's that's the way to play that. Donk shoving the river after the draws get there, when you've got the middling sort of strength hand, getting some value, preventing yourself from facing the donk shove, preventing yourself from facing the shove yourself against the stronger hands. So you get value from all the worse hands, and the stronger hands like the jack nine, the sets or whatever, you would have lost them anyway. You might as well get some value now.
What hands do you think big blind has that are weaker than queen 10 suited? Well, queen 10 over here, this top two pair, because the way big blind played this hand was like a middling pair, maybe 8 9s 10s, possibly jacks that he doesn't want to like call for bet for whatever reason, or some sort of a ace queen suited, which is heavily blocked by the queen in his hand and the queen on the board. So what sort of hands does this big blind have that calls this shove?
Like aces, kings, that kind of stuff. Doesn't really matter. It's just trying to play in a way that's close to GTO. And with this particular river, it's quite clear that it is in a GTO line. Right. Remember the bet size on the turn was very small, right? So that basically means that Pluribus here is going to have a fair amount of draws continuing. And so when those draws get there, it makes sense to shove, to have a leading range to shove, especially because only a half pot shove. You can't have too many draws with such a small bet from this orange here. Otherwise, like this happens to you.
Right. What type of hands will Mr. Orange go with such a small bet? Let's keep in mind that this was a cold call 3-bet pot from pre-flop.
I wouldn't think too much into it, because like it doesn't make any sense to have the cold call range here in the first place, or it's not to have queen 9 offsuit in it. But definitely, like, it could have like ace 10 suited, maybe, I don't know, pocket jacks.
I think like eights,
pocket kings, pocket aces.
Even sixes to jacks would probably make sense. Pairs. Maybe some of the queen jacks.
See if we can have a look at see we can have a look at the cold 3-bet range. Yeah, so look at everything that's V-pipped when it faces a 3-bet. So facing 3-bet, and you have the opportunity to cold call 3-bet. Yeah, okay, I think that'll do it. Yeah, okay. So this is what the cold calling, this is what the versus. Yeah, this is the cold versus 3-bet range.
Yeah, this makes sense. Has very strong hands that can see a flop, can play post flop. But
yeah, so it's like a cold forwarding range. It doesn't appear to have any calling. Oh no, wait, there was some with ace king. Maybe I'm wrong. Okay, this is an interesting one, I guess. What is going on here? Opens, smallish 3-bet, cold call, Pluribus calls out of position with the ace king. Okay.
This one's
So yeah,
weird.
that is quite strange, especially because Mr. Blue just cold calls the 3-bet as well.
Yeah, so much money on the table and such a good hand to 4-bet. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, but that was the only hand where it had the opportunity to. That was the only hand where it cold called a 3-bet, I think. See if I can get that exact filter to cold call a 3-bet. I don't know. Pre-flop calls called 3-bet. Sorry,
Maybe
cold
the
call
idea,
3-bet. Yeah.
yeah, maybe the idea behind that call is that with people calling behind, there might be some traps, so his 4-bet will not make as much money. I don't know.
Yeah, I only had this one cold calling of the 3-bet.
How about cold calling a 3-bet in position? I wonder if he has traps in there, because that would explain why he doesn't 4-bet in that spot, right?
Yeah, we just looked at the cold call 3-bet, and there wasn't any. There was only that one hand that we just looked at. So it doesn't appear to have any cold calls unless it's like very multi-way.
Okay.
It just appears that after the raise and the re-raise, it's queens plus ace king and ace queen, and then there was a king queen suited. Was there? I don't know. It's let's put that again for opportunities. Opportunity to call through that call. I think that'll do. Yeah. And so it only did it with these hands. So I'd imagine that because it's such a rare spot, I'd imagine that if it was dealt an aces in this spot, it would always raise that, and then ace queen suited and king queen suited. So we can't really get a lot of information about what it did, because there's only 13 hands. If there was if the sample was 100 times bigger, then we could get a better idea about what its ranges are. But because it isn't, then just unfortunate that we don't.
Could we just do one thing? I know it's probably going to sound a little bit weird, but if we change the player to Mr. White, I think it was, I'm just curious how much he lost in this 10,000 hands.
All right, let's have a look. I can do that. This is the graph of Mr. White. I don't know. Is there a particular reason why you want to look at Mr. White?
He's the guy who called 3-bet with queen 9 off, I think. I hope I didn't get him wrong.
Yeah, okay. A little bit more of that classic sort of.
Yeah, this is a fish.
Without showdown and winning with showdown. What other players were there? Mr. Orange. It's Orange losing as well. I wonder if anyone was winning. Mr. Blue was not doing too bad. But then again, it's like all the hands played against all the other players as well. So like it's not just like the playing against the bot only.
Yeah, that is cool.
It's five humans, one bot. Like obviously, a Mr. Blue is good against humans.
Yeah.
Then he's going to win.
I'm not trying to evaluate whether or not they beat the bot. That's not that's not why the question. The question was, one of the players, at least that guy cold calling the 3-bet, was like a fish, chip dumping, or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, it's not obvious that all the players that Pluribus played against were like top of their cash game. Maybe they had a mix of tournament players and whatever. But it's not obvious it's not blatantly obvious from this sample size from his 10,000 hands that Pluribus won either. Right? They had to go and do the statistical mumbo jumbo in order to get to the stage where,
Mm,
oh yeah, Pluribus won.
But I'm sure we can at least agree that the villains, at least some of them, had some really questionable plays.
Yes. Yes, I think that's true, and that's usually going to be the case when you're playing against humans. Humans make mistakes. I mean, this bot is never going to make any of the very strange plays that the humans have made. The humans make mistakes, so they're going to make. You're going to get into weird spots, and the bot has to be able to react to that.
Yeah, Lei just commented that humans might be over adjusting, and that kind of goes back into the conversation we had of whether or not the players knew that they were playing against the bot, and whether or not they over adjusted. See the ace-9 shove on the river for 4x pot, I think it was.
Yeah, if all the if the names were anonymized, so here they got Mr. White, Mr. Pink, whatever. If everyone was like that, including Pluribus, then it could be the case then that the humans don't know who they're playing against, who's human and who's just a bot, and so they're just going to be making whatever adjustments that they think is appropriate. And so some of the weird players, yeah, definitely could be from over adjusting. Some of the weird players just because they're not great players, but who knows?
So I guess the only things that we can draw out as conclusions from the session is that the bot actually, played fairly GTO because we recognize some of the lines, and he didn't make any mistakes that we've noticed, and also that he didn't had all the he appeared not to have all the sizes available for him on flop c bets.
Yeah, so I think in general the bot that was in this paper, Pluribus, is a bit too small in terms of the game tree that it's looking at, and so the addition of more bet sizes could make it quite a bit stronger. Of course, I imagine it's quite strong now, but stuff like the quarter pot and 75% pot bets on the flop would do it well in terms of becoming a bit stronger. Some other stuff is that, yeah, the multiple pre-flop, multiple open sizes, the c-bet frequencies across the multiple streets, and the folding frequencies, they're all quite close to 50%, which is what you would expect if you think about GTO, the 50% rule and how that works, and the overfolding, underfolding, whether or not you've made a bet on the previous street facing a bet yourself. So just from a broad point of view, it appears that the pre-flop ranges are up in Zenith, especially for the opening ranges. They do have some validity to them. So this is quite similar to how the bot plays, against an open. Makes sense to sort of play this way in a higher rake environment. The way the bot played with all the calling ranges makes sense in a no rake environment. But as soon as you start to add rake, playing more like this makes sense. All right. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions before we finish up?
I just wanted to reiterate the same thing that you said. As an observation of the bot, there's multiple opening sizes pre-flop, just because we saw them, and I guess it's something to note.
All right. So any last questions? No. All right. So thanks to everybody for showing up and watching along, listening along. Hopefully you learned something. Might do some deeper hand analysis of some of the individual hand histories at a later stage. But I just wanted to get a brief overview of sort of how the bot played and its pre-flop strategy and some of its post-flop sizings that it used. So for everyone at home, thanks for watching, and I'll get this recording up soon.
Thank you for the session.